Hi, I'm John Walker and welcome to the first instalment of Town Crier. We're in northeastern Victoria at the beautiful George Kerford Hotel up here on the hill in Beechworth, and what better place to interview the 18th federal member for Indi, Dr Helen Haines. But first, we took to the streets to find out what you're thinking right now.
We all live in the environment, you can't escape it, so you've got to have an environment that we can live in, because my generation is on the way out. A younger generation like them, they're on the way in. They need to be able to breathe and don't want to be cooked.
I guess the way it's going, it doesn't look great, but that's, we don't know how it goes year to year. Things change, so yeah.
There's not many people doing the part that they need to. I think a lot of people think that they aren't responsible for the work, but like everyone has to live in it. I think everyone should do their part, and I don't think a lot of people realise that yet.
We need a healthy environment for healthy people. You just can't kill everything and push everything out without any thought of what was there before. You need to have compassion and empathy for our surroundings and our wildlife if we're going to succeed on our journey.
I think that we're probably a little bit slower to pick up on things than the cities are. So cutting down on plastic and things like that. I think we're getting a lot better, which is really good to see. Obviously, we've had a lot of shops get rid of the plastic bags, and yeah, it sounds like the councils are fairly aware of the different issues and doing what they can about it. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could be doing, and hopefully that will start to roll out pretty quickly.
I think a lot more workplaces could be doing things within their workplace, just
yes,
having
I
more
agree.
recycling opportunities, recycling bins. So yeah, there are a lot of places that probably don't embrace it as well in the workplace.
Yeah.
We're building a stone house with natural timbers and all that sort of thing, so that's one thing I'm doing.
I don't eat dairy. I try not to use any plastic, like reusable bags and paper bags and things.
Same. No plastic.
Yeah, no plastic. Picking up rubbish whenever I see it. Yeah.
Recycling, yeah.
I think majority of people want to do the right thing. They want to recycle. They want to live sustainably. They want to reduce their local, carbon footprint. They, think about where their flight miles. How do they really have to go, or how can I offset that, or how can I reduce our guilt for living in the world as human beings do. And sometimes something as simple as getting to know the nature in your local neighbourhood gets your feet back on the ground a bit. It gets you back in touch with what is important. So, we all know family is important, so spending time with yourself is important. Like giving yourself a little bit of quiet space and time is important. And those boxes all get ticked by going for a walk in nature.
Well, speaking of environments and somewhat strange environments, I want to go back to August the 1st, and you're walking through the doors of Parliament House in Canberra to deliver your maiden speech. What was the feeling?
John, a feeling of a tingle throughout my body, knowing that this was a really big moment, and that making the first speech in Parliament, there's only one chance to do that. So I knew this was a big moment. I knew that everything that I had brought along with me was going to be on show for that day and those few moments when I had that chance at the floor of the House. I felt really mindful. We talk a lot about mindfulness in our society, and I had a very, very nice feeling, an acute awareness of what was about to happen, and it was a good feeling. I didn't feel too nervous, although I must have had a lot of adrenaline in my body because my mouth was rather dry when I went to speak. But I felt very proud, I felt very privileged, and I felt very aware that this was a big moment.
The speech is about 27 minutes. Do they give you a time?
Yeah, it went a bit long actually. So it should be around 25 minutes. So I went a couple of minutes over. That they do, but that's the day where you have the indulgence of the House.
Yes, yeah.
So
quite.
no one will interrupt you, and the Speaker's very generous. And in fact, I trimmed my speech back a lot. It was going to land at 20 minutes. And the day before, the Speaker of the House, Mr Tony Smith, who's he's a nice man.
Seems so.
Yeah, lovely. He came to me, he followed me out of the chamber one day and said, Helen, you're giving your first speech tomorrow. Yes, I am, Mr Smith. He said, don't worry about the time. Enjoy it. Take your time.
Yeah, brilliant to know.
Yeah.
How do you go about, there's so much that you could be saying to a public audience for the first time, about yourself, about your electorate, about life, about Australia.
Yeah.
What do you choose to put in, and what do you choose to leave out?
Yeah.
How do you get that together?
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of thinking. And of course there's a formula with first speeches, and you're quite right. That's the day that you introduce yourself to the House, you introduce your electorate to the House, and you pin your hopes and dreams for the Parliament. So that was the formula I worked with. And for me, I knew I had to start at the very beginning. I had to weave through the key values of my life. I had to weave through our very important, our crucial, our fundamental Aboriginal grounding, and that had to be there for me.
Yeah.
And I had to introduce Indi to the electorate.
Yeah.
I had to introduce Indi to the nation. And 17 members of Parliament from Indi had done that before. So I looked back at all their speeches and I thought, what haven't they talked about? So that's why I introduced actually a bit of the Kelly story, because that hadn't been talked about before. I was so mindful of who was there with me, and there was a couple of galleries full of people with me.
The gallery, when the camera panned across the gallery, a sea of orange and ablaze with smiling faces and interested listeners, and it was sort of quite moving.
Yeah, it was really moving. And so a key part of my speech was the recognition of those who had brought me to that moment in time. And it was all of those supporters and those at home who couldn't come. And it was the voters of Indi who didn't even know me, who had taken a leap of faith. So it was all of those people, in addition to my forebears and the giants upon whose shoulders I stood in our previous members for Indi, most especially, of course, Kathy.
I remember one thing I asked Kathy a while ago was, she was sitting next to Clive Palmer.
Yeah.
And I asked her if she had any room on the bench. Or had enough room on the bench. I'm sitting next to Clive.
Very cheeky, John.
Very cheeky. She was very polite.
Yeah, I'm sure she was, yes.
Now, who will you be sitting next to?
Yes, well, all of that's, you have no say in this, of course. This just happened. So I sit next to Adam Bant, and he, of course, doesn't take up much room at all.
Yeah.
So we're very comfortable, the pair of us.
Yeah.
And I must say, he's a very nice fellow and has been an excellent buddy, because he's been in the Parliament for 3 parliaments now, so he knows how it runs. And so I'm often like a schoolgirl, almost passing him notes saying, what's going on now?
That's an interesting thing, and I wanted to ask about that, because I remember Kathy saying that, a lot of people, you meet so many people in the line of work, obviously, but you don't always see, or the public doesn't see, who's behind the scenes. And just to go back to Clive Palmer, she made a particular point that, yes, there is the public image of a man of that standing and a controversial figure in our nation. But she made the point that you don't get to see behind the scenes, that he had done some very important work on various committees that aren't reported in the paper. And she said that could be said of so many people in Parliament. So, there's a small percentage that makes a headline. There's a small percentage that makes page 2 and 3.
Yes.
But she said there are hundreds of things that go on that people contribute positively to. Are there people that you're really looking forward to working with in Parliament, like Adam?
Yeah, well, John, first of all, I would absolutely concur with Kathy's comments that what we see, if you happen to be a close observer of Australian politics and you may happen to watch Question Time or you're following the news, you see the controversial bits, you see the conflict, you see the tensions, you see the people at loggerheads. But in fact, there's many opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. In fact, most people are keen to do that. So when the cameras are rolling, things look a bit different, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of committee work, there's a lot of incidental conversations, there's a lot of setting up meetings and visiting each other in our offices to talk about things that we share an interest in. I really agree with Kathy about that. And what was the last part of that question?
People that you're particularly excited about working with.
Yeah. So, you know what? I mean, I don't want to sound corny, but I'm most excited about working with the community in how we prosecute the agenda that we talked a lot about during the election campaign. And then for me, it's about finding who it is in the Parliament, in the 46th Parliament, that I can leverage to help us achieve that agenda. So, it's a funny thing. Sometimes you have allegiances that you don't expect. So, only a couple of weeks ago, we were in a division, and you move across the aisle according to which way you're going to vote, and lo and behold, Mr. Barnaby Joyce sits beside me. And I turned to Barnaby, I said, "Barnaby, we've got something in common." He looked a little surprised. I don't know what he knew about me. But he said, "What would that be?" And I said, you think that the New Start allowance should be raised, and so do I. How could we work together on that to really bring the voices of rural and regional Australians who are affected by the New Start allowance and get some action? Yeah, so, you'll find things. And I'm a great believer. Try and find the bit that you have in common before you go looking for something that you don't.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? The Barnaby Joyce thing, someone pointed out that, his comments were taken somewhat out of context, as can happen very easily. And so suddenly, there was a cartoon of someone saying, poor old Barnaby, he's reduced to smoking a Horizon 50s, which I thought was quite hilarious.
Oh, dear.
However, do you worry that each time you speak, that you've just got to be careful what you're saying, how you're saying it? Can you be perfectly natural, or have you just got to... Is there an onboard computer just editing and filtering stuff as you're saying it?
Look, mostly I'm perfectly natural, because I think one of the gorgeous advantages of being an independent is I don't have to check in with Party HQ before I say anything. For me, I always need to check in with, is this a reasonable thing to say? Is this a respectful thing to say? How would the people of Indi feel if I said that? So I kind of run through that in my mind. That's pretty easy, because there's some fundamental values that I think we all share, and what I said I would subscribe to if I was the member for Indi. So to be honest, that comes pretty naturally. So mostly I just tell it as it is, or how I see it. There's times when I'm not sure, and then I would say, you know what, I actually don't know. I'd need to check in with my community on that.
Yeah.
But there will be times, and there's, just in Parliament, straight after my first speech, I got to ask my first question. And I thought to myself, well, should I just ask a question that's going to be, a simple one for the government to answer, or will I ask a question that's got a little more punch in it? And I thought, yeah, damn, I'll go the punch, I'll go the punch, because it was about New Start, and it was around the fairness, and it was around... I knew that the government would say they're not going to raise New Start, and that, the best way to get off welfare is to get a job. That's kind of the standard line, a standard line that I have some fundamental problems with. But I wanted to highlight the issue that CPI is no longer a reasonable measure to anchor New Start about. So... I guess I went... I wouldn't say I would ever take an aggressive line, but I'm never afraid of going in with a bit of a punch to say, hey, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the issue that was raised last week about Dorothy Dix's?
Yeah.
During question time, and I think it's a very good one. Asking your own party a question, which is an absolute sitter, a lay down misere.
Yeah. I think it's really diminished diminish the debate in the House. I would be so embarrassed if I was a backbencher for the government and I had to ask those questions. And I look at there's 27 new members of Parliament in the lower house, and there's some extraordinarily talented people with amazing previous lives, incredible professional credentials, and there they are standing up asking these dixes.
What do they do? Do they get an email saying, look, hi, how are you? I thought you might ask me today this question.
Yeah. Look, I've got to get to the bottom of this. I imagine there's somebody punching these all out, and before they go into the House, they hand them around, because that's what it looks like. They've all got the same size sheet of paper, and it's always talking. They're so lame. They're just dreadful. And then the minister gets up and gives, the stock answer, but not
Thank you
before.
for the question.
That's right. Thank you for the question, Mr. Walker, and what a fine member for Beechworth you are.
Exactly.
And, what a
And
marvellous
Mr.
scarf
Speaker,
you're
can I
wearing
just
today.
Can I just compliment you on your hair today?
Yeah. So it's really, to be honest, it's so eye-rolling, and I've adopted the good advice that Kathy gave me is that make sure you take your laptop into question time. You can catch up on your emails while they're doing that business. So I'm actually getting a bit of work done when all that's going on. It's crazy, really.
Yeah, I want to go back. Your early life was spent in the strangely named town of Urack, E-U-R-A-C-K.
Yes.
Tell us about Urack. Down near Colac.
That's right, just next door to Biak. Yeah.
Tuppernuckanak.
And don't forget, my mother went to school in Karagulak. Clickety, clack.
Yeah. What was going on in Urack?
Okay, so Urack is on the edge of the Western Plains. So the big towns close to us were Ballarat and Geelong, Colac. Yeah, so flat country, windy country, often pretty cold, kind of sleety rain at times. Yeah, tiny population. Had a little school, number 3448, had a tennis court. Actually, we got two eventually. Little hall and one of the oldest avenues, memorial avenues for the First World War, interestingly, also. Dairy farming country, but marginal dairy farming country. Yeah.
So pretty tough there. Your dad left school when he was 13.
That's right. So both my parents lost a parent very early when they were very young children, and I think their family stories reflect not only the sadness of losing a parent, but also the economic implications of that, particularly in a time where there was no support for people who were in hard times. My dad's father was only 44 when he died, and my father was 7, and he had 3 other brothers, and they were living out on this dairy farm. So Dad, unfortunately for him, must have been not too bad at school, because he skipped a grade, which was a disadvantage because he had to leave school even earlier. And his headmaster, Mr. Dobry, rode a horse at speed to my grandmother's house when Dad had come to school to say he'd be leaving the next day, to ask my grandmother to please leave him at school. But no, she had no choice, really. He was needed at home to milk cows and help saddle up the draft horses, plough fields, look after the pigs, do all the things that you do on a farm.
Were you a public speaker then when you were at primary school, or were you one of the step-up people at primary school? The go-to person? Or someone's got to make a speech at Anzac Day. Yeah, we'll get Helen.
No, I don't reckon I was. There was a lot of competition for that. Maybe we were all pretty lippy down there. I don't know. But there was a lot of my cousins. Our family, my father's brothers remained in that area, and so the cousins went to school there too. And we had a school concert every year, and of course we all performed. I think it was one of those things, when you're in a tiny school, you have to do everything.
Yeah.
But I do know for sure that if you were, relatively quick on the uptake learning to read, then your job very quickly was teaching someone else how to read. I was tasked with in a one-teacher school in taking on the kids who were younger than me. So certainly that. But at secondary school, I did a bit of public speaking and debating. Actually, I was one of those kind of nerdy kids who was a debater.
Yes, it's interesting. Like, you get a bit of a there's a bit of a dichotomy happening with you. You know, you've got sometimes you see public speakers, sometimes you see debate, and sometimes you see, there's the nursing background and all different colours and shades, if you like. When you were at school, did anything appeal to you as something as a career that you would like to go on with? For instance, being on the dairy farm, was it important for you to say, look, what did you think of the future of dairy farming at that stage, for instance?
I don't think I thought too much about it. It just was. I worked in the dairy, as did my brothers. That was part of life. You took your turn. You fed cows. You fed calves. My brother and I, we used to have to chop. We were in the hammer mill, chopping up old straw and, all of that stuff, just like farm kids do. My father was very, very strong, and his advice to me, though, as his only daughter, was whatever you do, don't marry a Morrissey or a dairy farmer. So that was kind of his life lessons to me.
Apologies to the Morrisseys who are with us today.
The Morrissey story went back generations. Some member of the Morrissey family left a gate open and a herd of cows got out onto the road, and there was some injury and long-held suspicion. So
yeah, wow.
I know, a bit of intrigue in Urack.
Morrissey's still down in Urack?
I have a lot of friends in the Morrissey family.
Marion and Jack were your parents, and you said in your speech, I'm betting if they were alive today, their advice to me in this place would be to sit up straight, clean your shoes, and don't put up with too much Tommy rot. Is that going to be your motto, your mantra?
It's funny how some things just follow you, don't they? I was told the other day I've become an influencer. People are talking about Tommy rot.
The word influencer, yeah.
Isn't it a great old word? And I used
Tommy rot.
Tommy rot.
Oh, fabulous.
Oh, yeah, it is. And I used it in a speech one day, and it got roars of laughter. And then I had a challenge on Twitter just prior to my first speech to say, Helen Haines, will you be introducing Tommy Rot to the House? And I said, challenge accepted.
Who is Tommy?
I don't know. But of course it means nonsense. And it is a terrific word.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of those expressions, that could be one of your duties, is to bring back those. Because there's some old crackers around this thing.
My giddy aunt.
Oh, my giddy aunt. Oh, my hat,
yes,
even.
That's right. Heavens above. All of those lovely, lovely expressions.
Hey, by the way, you thanked all the people from Indi who had come up on the buses, and you said, there's people from Wandillagong and people from Wodonga, and you said people from Yipoti Potpon.
I know.
And I went, what? And I went back in the speech, in the transcript, because I thought that's some sort of chicken Thai curry, isn't it? Your body pot pon.
Ooh.
What is it? Where is it?
Oh, it's down the southern end of the electorate, in the Strathbogie Shire. Yeah, isn't it a fantastic name?
What's there?
Oh, it's a bit like Urack.
Yeah.
Except a better name.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been to Urack, your potty pot pond.
Oh, yeah. I feel sorry for the MPs from urban electorates. They don't get to have nearly so much fun, do they?
No, pronouncing things.
That's right,
I mean, how dull is it to be from Coburg?
I know. I feel on so many fronts, I'm just so proud and pleased to be the member for Indi and to have such a beautiful electorate with so many iconic places and so many iconic stories. So I feel sorry for those city-based MPs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we need to talk about obviously medical and how did you? Sorry, it's been incredibly inarticulate.
Spit it out, John.
Yes, exactly. We'll do a big leap and go into your study in Sweden in epidemiology.
A bit like you potty potpon, that word.
She studied you potty potpon in epidemiology. Why were you in Sweden studying? And this you did a doctorate in
medical science.
Medical science. What was going on there?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned in my speech that that about the same time as our children arrived in the 90s, so did the internet. And of course, for a lot of young people, you can't imagine life without the internet. But what it did was open up a whole world to all of us. And for me, living in Wangaratta, where we had our little farm and little children arriving, I was working part-time, as many mothers do. I've always been pretty keen on learning things and study, and the opportunity to study online was there, and I thought, oh heck, I might do a bit of that. I started doing a bachelor's course, and then through my work, I was very conscious as a midwife that the impact a midwife could have, not only on the individuals that you care for, but potentially on the whole population, could be profound if you understood all the drivers of health and you planted the seeds early and you educated people around broader health issues and around a good start to life for a little baby, around understanding family dynamics, all of those things. So I thought maybe I should take a master's degree in public health, and a key component of public health is epidemiology, which is the study of populations and patterns of disease. And in order to understand population data, you need to understand statistics, and you need to understand the social determinants of health and all of the things that impact that ultimately create an outcome.
I don't know about you, but stats is not my long suit. How do you go with stats? Stats.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a little inclined to perhaps, jump in where angels fear to tread. And no, I'd never considered myself much of a mathematician, but I thought, well, I'll have a go at this. It was kind of difficult at first, but I got the hang of it. And it was in studying for my master's degree that I came upon some research from a group of researchers in Uppsala, an ancient university, 14th century university in Sweden, and there at the WHO Collaborating Centre for Women's and Children's Health, there was some really good research. So I sent them an email, which was rather novel at the time. The old dial-up internet, sent the email, hello, my name is Helen Haines, I live in Wangaratta, a long way from you, Potty Pot Pond, but, on the same road. And I've just read a couple of your research articles, really fascinated by those. How could a gal like me, get to work with some people like you? And anyway, ping, pressed send, and the next day when I woke up...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's them calling.
Hello. You're just doing an interview with Helen Haines? Yeah. Okay, see you later. Bye. It's my son.
Oh, important. Where are the chocolate biscuits?
Exactly. So you've emailed them?
Yeah. Anyway, they emailed back and they said, well, we're really delighted to talk to you, and, long story short, in the end, I spoke to the University of New South Wales, where I was studying, and said I'd like to go and spend 6 months at the WHO in Uppsala and work with these guys, and could I do that as part of my course? And they said, no, you can't. So they wrote back to Uppsala and said, no, sorry, you can't have this student. That's no good. That's not going to work. Anyway, that was, I think, about June. And unbeknown to me, there was a bit of correspondence went on between the two of them. And in November, I got a phone call from University of New South Wales saying, look, we've received numerous emails from Uppsala, and they can't understand why you couldn't possibly come across and work with us. So we've decided that you can, but you need to be there in January. So this was November, and we had 3 kids and jobs and all sorts of stuff. So we got organised pretty fast, and over I went. And that began something very new for me, and pretty much changed my life, I'd say.
Extraordinary decision. That you were saying, I remember that in Uppsala they had a process where you have to, in the end, do a public lecture that defends your thesis.
Yes.
And you decided to do the opening of it in Swedish.
Yes, I did. Another example of fools rush in where angels fear to tread.
Brave choice, I would have thought. Brave choice.
Brave choice.
How'd it go?
Oh yeah, look, actually, it was a comedy act. It did literally on a cold winter's morning, -10 January, Uppsala, snow up to your waist. It literally broke the ice. My supervisors, who were, very, very stern, at the front row in the defence in the ancient building, the Gustavianum, in the same room where Anders Celsius defended his thesis.
Good grief.
I know, good grief.
Anders Celsius.
Yeah.
There's a name.
There's a name. So there they
Talk
were.
about being
in their-
remembered.
I know. Talk about feeling adequate. So there they were in their fur coats, and the look on their face when I was introducing the topic in Swedish, they pulling faces, and then the smile just broke across the room. Oh my God, she is speaking Swedish. And I hadn't ever spoken Swedish in the 5 years I'd had association with them. It was terrible Swedish. It was so bad. But anyway, we kicked off with that.
Was your point of reference the Swedish chef from The Muppets?
A little, yes. No, I was actually, when I said before I wasn't that nervous for my first speech, I was petrified for my defence. Honest to God, I've never been so scared in my life. And all my family were across, and we had teenage kids at the time, and I thought, I can't cope with them because they'll make me late for my own defence. I'm going to sleep in a hotel the night before my defence. I'm not staying with the family, so I took myself off to a hotel. I was so nervous and anxious. I couldn't sleep at all. So I turned on the television, and there was a documentary on, and it was all about Australia. And the key question was, are all Australians drunkards? That's what the Swedes were talking about.
Wow.
I'm not sure this is a good start for me for tomorrow. So I turned up for my defence, having not slept a wink and really, really scared.
That's often, though, when you're under that sort of the fug of being unable to sleep at night, all these things racing through your head.
Yeah.
Somehow your body just sends you into a zone.
Yes, it does. It does. So, what followed then is a standard defence of your doctoral thesis, which is around 3.5 hours of interrogation.
Oh, my hat. Okay.
So good preparation for Parliament, I reckon, John.
Yeah, I like this. I just wanted a very good preparation for Parliament. I wanted to there was a quote in your speech, I loved this. Throughout my career, I have been privileged to care for people as they take their first breath of life and as they take their last. And when I was reading that, I thought there would be so few people in Parliament who would be able to say that. And obviously that means an enormous amount to you in the way that you think about life and deal with people.
It so does. Again, I think of the great privileges I've had in my life. So the privilege of being there when someone takes their first breath, it takes your breath away. It's the most extraordinary thing, and anyone who's been there for that, and many people have, of course, either giving birth themselves to a baby or being present there as a father or a support person has witnessed that and knows what I'm talking about. But at the other end, to be there and shepherd, be that shepherd, I think, as someone leaves this life and hearing the last breath. Yeah. It's profound, no question. So for me, that's those experiences never leave me. And as now a parliamentarian and representing people, I'm so conscious that life is short. Life is short, and we share this common humanity. We all take the first breath, and we will all take our last. So that for me gives me a great sense of what's important and the impact that public policy can have on the lives of people. I feel very privileged to be a member of Parliament, to be a representative of our communities of Indi. But I've had feelings of privilege before in my life, and they are in those environments.
Strange segue now. One of the privileges, if you call it that, of life is the Deb Ball.
Ah, yes.
And we do a Streetwalker segment on the program, as we saw earlier, and Johnny Kovacs went out on the street to ask a few people about Deb.
What they're doing is presenting the young person to society, and I think kids present themselves to society these days. They don't need any help from the adults.
At that age, a lot of them are a bit gangly.
Yes,
they're
and they're trying to remember the steps.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
all that
So
sort of
that's
stuff.
really funny.
I must say, I haven't learnt the whatever the do-si-do, pride of error, and I haven't practiced that in years.
It's ridiculous. I think girls are just taking it way out of they're just not keeping it to how the traditional way was. I think back into, young girls becoming ladies, that was the whole kind of traditional thing of it, and now it's just let's just go get pissed.
When I was doing it, I was living in a heterosexual world, but I was a gay man in silence, you know what I mean? And that really made me suffer. Yeah. And so I think the allowance today is amazing.
Ada, do you want to go to dances? There's the answer for you.
I didn't go. No. Why? Why would I, you talk, you had to prompt me because I didn't remember what that was. And that's, the debutante ball.
When I was in year 10, I was on some sort of soapbox about it, and I was all like, they're just a meat market and I'm not going to participate. But I think with a lot of those sort of things, it's, I regret not doing it. And mostly because I've seen people doing it, enjoying it, and they reinterpret it for themselves in a way that suits their perspective on life. So it's not seen as, I'm 16 now, I'm going to be put on the market to be married. It's a chance for kids to practice being adults, and I think that's a really important step.
I think that's a bit like a vintage car, really. It's nice to see them out occasionally, but I don't know if in today's world it has a place.
The girls love dressing up. I remember making my debutante ball or doing my deb. It's a fun night. It's nice for 18-year-olds. So, I don't know. I don't think it hurts anybody at all.
No, it doesn't hurt anyone. I'm entirely the opposite. When I was at boarding school in Sydney and they had the deb ball and I was like, radical lefty. I'm not doing that.
We were in one of the stores the other day, and where was it? The Mexican place down the road, and a heap of kids come in all dressed up for their deb, getting Mexican, weren't they, before their big night? But I think it's still a big thing.
Our year 10 thing was cancelled, and to me that wasn't a problem. I didn't really care for it because I still hung out with the people who I wanted to see that same date anyway, so it wasn't a problem for me, but a lot of people were pretty upset about it. I find that a lot of girls at the time were quite upset about that because it's a really big thing to them, and at first I didn't understand why, but now as I'm older I can see why, because it's that sort of stuff lasts with you outside of school and things like that. So yes, I do think that sort of stuff is very important.
It's like bachelor and spinster balls too, B&S balls and that sort of stuff as well. You don't see them as often in balls full stop anymore.
I see people doing it, but it's not really something that I would have done, but each to their own.
Girls don't take it seriously anymore. They just go and, let's just go get some friends together and waste all our parents' money. Yeah.
Can everybody afford that? And then is there a delineation between who can afford and who can't, for example?
I myself didn't really want to do it. I didn't really see the sense of it.
I don't know whether social etiquette has changed much since I went through school, but they were a pretty big part.
I don't know. I went to a deb ball recently with my son, and I was a bit ambivalent. But I've got to say, I really enjoyed the experience, and it was a beautiful night. And I spoke to a lot of young people there who just said, "No, we really like doing this because it's something different. It's a bit of a link to tradition in the past." Have you been through the deb experience with your kids?
Yes, been through the deb experience, and even the fact we call it a deb. It's a debutante ball, but we Australianise it. We call it the deb. It's the deb.
There's the deb ball and deb mashed potato.
Indeed, yeah, and they're both white. But John, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because I was the kind of person who thought, you know what, deb balls, they're so wrong. They're so wrong. This old business of displaying young women into the kind of wife market is the tradition of them, or stepping out into society. It's kind of, it's anachronistic. What on earth in a society like Australia are we doing still, playing in the dead ball space? But our 3 kids all did the dead ball, and the first one I went to, I was a bit reluctant, didn't quite know what this was going to be like, but saw my, our eldest son, who was pretty scruffy. He got himself all suited up. He looked incredibly handsome, and felt a little tingle of pride there, and off we went, and it was a lovely night. And what struck me was, number one, it wasn't just about the young women being on display. It was actually about young women and men doing something nice together, learning some lovely dances, having to display good manners and decorum, and that was nice. And they had lots and lots of fun, and they had fun shared with family and friends. So it was a real surprise to me how positive it was and how much the young people enjoyed it.
Yeah, young people these days, or any days, always a lot of challenges. A lot of talk about mental health at the moment, but also things like education, careers. They're always challenged with changing environments and worrying things in the news. Where does a young person? What are they at climate change? Massive. It was great to see the other day the university students actually getting out and taking to the streets and asking questions about climate change. What's the future hold for them right now?
Well, maybe I'll take it back to the dead ball scene in a sense, because perhaps why many young people like the dead ball is that it grounds them in some tradition and puts them on a pathway that other people have followed, so a sense of maybe belonging. Having said that, I'm really mindful that many debutante balls now have become much more inclusive. So, same-sex attracted young people can do their deb with their partner too, and that's good and okay, and they're accepted in doing so. So I'm really pleased that that's happened, because again, those debutante balls in their tradition could in fact be rather exclusive. So a young person not feeling like they fitted in. So happy about that. In terms of how do young people get a sense of who they are in the world that they're stepping out into, I think, you're right. That's been an issue for young people since Socrates really has talked about that. But what we see right now, of course, is many other challenges that are much more public, and young people, of course, I think comparing themselves not only to their peers in their own little town, but their peers internationally too through social media, and really very challenging to get a sense of who you are and where you fit in and how you measure up. So I'm conscious of that. Young people tell me about that. Many young people are very, very concerned about global warming, climate change, about the environment more generally. And for me, in this election campaign that we've come out of, and now as their representative in Parliament, I'm very committed to doing what I can with our community to raise with the government the inadequacies of our current policy around climate change. And people ask me why I'm so passionate about that, and I say to them, I'm bringing the passion of the young people who talk to me, and not just the young people actually, older people too, who are concerned about the future for young people, because we talked before about taking your last breath, and I'm 57. I'm running into the last quarter, so, but those young people are just entering. They're just entering the match, so we need to be really doing something about that. I'm glad that many young people are finding their voice through action on climate, and I really encourage them to.
Do you see any short-term fixes? We were talking the other night, some mates and I, about remembering 30 years ago or 40 years ago, people were going to pipe water from the Ord River scheme down into southeastern Australia, the Murray-Darling Basin into Western Australia. We've got, a real crisis issue right now with the Murray-Darling Basin. Yeah. And a bloke raised this the other night and said, there's still the Ord River and massive, a body of water up there that's 20 times the size of Sydney Harbour, and most of it flows out to sea. Is it likely that those sort of those sort of solutions will be raised again as potentials?
Yeah, people talk about those. There's a lot of talk, actually, from my colleague on the crossbench, Bob Catter, talks a lot about these things. He talks about the floods that happen in the wet up in the north and the capacity to capture that water and send it down south. So I don't know that anyone's too serious about that, to be honest, John. I think what we need to consider very, very much is what we do with the resources that we currently have, how we adapt to our changing situation, how we prioritise our activities, and it's hard to change. I think one thing that I hear really very, very often in my dealings with people is a fundamental lack of trust in the governance of how we're caring for our environment, and that concerns me. I think if we don't trust the systems that we have in place, then we're not going to comply. And I think we've seen that in the Murray-Darling Basin plan. We've seen that up north, the northern part of the Darling River, particularly, where the compliance issues are not good, compared again with how the communities along the southern end of the basin are operating. So that's a big concern. Yeah, infrastructure seems like something that we can talk about. You know, it's bricks and mortar or pipes and dams. It's tangible. It's a project approach that people think, great, we can put money into that and get behind it. So, yeah, I can see why that would bring comfort to people to think about that. Whereas fundamental changes to how we run our lives, how we operate within our own environment, is a little bit harder to get our head around.
It's the economic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it.
It's the economic factor. And there seems to be always a thing where we say, well, we want you to do this, we want you to change. I'm only doing my little bit, but you have to do the big changes, you people over there.
Yeah.
And that goes for, saying to people in third world countries, well, you've got to cut your emissions and all that. But these are people who are still burning wood to make fires for cooking.
Yeah.
So it's a little, globally it seems to me it's a little bit difficult to say to people, you've got to change your way because, we've mucked things up and we want to show you that, you've got to... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so
hypocritical.
Well, it is. Again, it comes back to values and ethics, and it's complex, of course. And nobody wants to go back to a way of life that's lesser than what they have now. But we've had great big transitions in our history before. I mean, we think about the Industrial Revolution, how that changed lives dramatically. And of course, it's the Industrial Revolution on steroids that has got us to the point that we have such rising emissions now. I fundamentally believe, and I think I described myself in my speech as a defiant optimist. I really believe we've got the smarts, we've got the capacity, we've got the technology, we've got the will to change how we generate our energy. And, we don't want to not have energy to run all our machines and, do all the things that we love to do, but we can generate it in other ways. We can adapt our farming practices, provided we provide the research, development and support to our farming and agricultural communities. So for me, it's, again, bringing it back to the ethics of our humanity. We need to find just transitions to a new way of living. And the other thing I'd say is we need to be really clear about who's paying who and who's got their hands in places that they shouldn't be. And I think many Australians are aware, but probably not everyone, that we need a lot more transparency in political donations. We need to know who's funding our decision makers, and if there are key lobby groups who stand to gain by political decisions, and I'm talking about big coal, or big pharma, or big whatever. Those industries have a right to do what they do, but we have a right to know if they are contributing to the success or otherwise of political parties who ultimately end up making decisions that affect us all.
Big power, energy, gas, electricity, can we ever get that back?
Well, I mean, here we are sitting in Beechworth, where communities are taking control of grabbing back the power, literally, and finding just ways to distribute power, just ways to generate power, and just ways to step forward as citizens with answers rather than problems. So, this is extraordinary in Indi, where we have community energy groups up and down this electorate, more than any other region in Australia. So I think if you talk about people taking responsibility, there's so many people in our community doing just that and leading the way. I'm really proud of that. It's incredible.
Yeah, we live in interesting times.
We do.
I want to move on with more little vignettes from your speech. We can grow our regions to a greater sustainable prosperity. Before I go ask that question about our regions, and you say you are a rural Australian, which I'm so glad and relieved, one expression I cannot tolerate is the bush. The bush is hurting. It seems so patronising. It seems so city-centric. That there's the city, which is the real place, and then there's the bush, which is like the back of an Australia Post magazine, with Edamoga pub up there and the desert and
the bushwhacker.
Yeah, and a bushwhacker and a bloke with corks on his hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't stand that sort of media. And some people very easily fall into the trap that there is the city, Australia, and then there's the bush.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very easy to understand the world if it's binary, if it's us and them, if it's black and white, if it's city, if it's the bush, so it's an easy thing to fall into. I'm really passionate about rural Australians being seen for who they are: diverse, sophisticated, clever, funny, hardworking, lazy, whatever. We're everything.
All of the above.
All of the above. That we're not just a trope. We're not all just, Clancy of the Overflow. Much and all as I love, I love that poetry, I love those stories. But, many people in rural Australia don't live on the land. They live in small towns or regional cities. It's interesting that you say that about the bush, because I quoted quite widely from Don Watson's book,
I
The
noticed
Bush.
that in the speech,
But, I think what Don's showing us in that, what I think is a marvellous book, is what the bush actually is, and it's not a wilderness necessarily. It can be, or it can't be too. The thing I loved about Don Watson, and of course he's so lyrical, I love the way that Don was able to describe again our common humanity and the sum of the many small things that come from rural Australia. So I really love that about that particular book. But I'm actually a great believer that big things come from rural Australia too. And I really believe that our opportunities for renewed prosperity can come from the generation of renewable energy.
Sadly, seems so far behind, and there's always been this question mark of why isn't Australia at the forefront of these, the forefront of renewable technologies, at the forefront of that way of thinking.
Again, I would put the question: who's paying? Who's influencing? Where's the power coming from? Who is in the ear of the decision makers, and what's holding them back? I think it's a question Australians have to ask. It's why, together with some of my crossbench colleagues, we are calling for a Federal Integrity Commission to examine these things, to look at political donations, to look at lobbyists, to look at decisions that are made, to give our citizens the opportunity to say, hey, hang on a minute, this doesn't smell right. Can this be investigated? I think it's really, really important.
And I agree with you, and I think that committee, Integrity Committee, should have their headquarters at Crown Casino in Melbourne.
Yeah, gosh.
Now, there was a lovely quote from you, Florence Nightingale, not surprisingly, and you say, she said, how little can be done under the spirit of fear. Wow, that rocked me when I read that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in your speech.
Let's just sit with it. Fear paralyses people. Fear makes us react. Fear gets the flight and fright response going.
Are we too fearful as a society?
Well, I think I said earlier in this chat, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I don't think you need to be a fool, actually, to face your fear. Sometimes you've got to look at fear and understand what it's generating in you and try to get a sense of, is this fear real or perceived? What is it that I'm afraid of? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? What are the wins? What are the losses? And understand, I guess, do a risk assessment. That's what a sensible person does. But if you just sit with the fear, Florence Nightingale's so right. If you just sit with the fear, you disable yourself. So it's a beautiful quote, and I think I really encourage people to read a lot more about Florence Nightingale. She's so much more than the Lady of the Lamp. She was quite a radical and a great intellect, and one of our earliest scientists.
Yeah. There's an extraordinary... there's a book on... Anyway, we'll go back to Florence Nightingale, we'll go to the final topic before we wrap up, if that's all right. And you mentioned this in your speech, that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have invited Australians to walk with them to achieve voice, treaty and truth. And someone said last week, unless the whole recognition of the First Nations people in the Constitution is there, this debate is happening right now. Unless we get it right, that now it won't happen at all.
Well, again, I can't predict the future. I can only live at the moment in what's happening right now in this 46th Parliament. I think we have a very real opportunity to make this happen. It's many years. 1967 was the last time we did anything substantial for our First Nations people. I believe so strongly that we cannot progress as a nation. We cannot be the nation we really could be unless we get this right. And for me, as a privileged white woman, I see my role very much as standing beside or standing behind the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as they put their voice to Parliament. They've called for this in the most dignified, respectful way. They are the most patient of people, and the most powerful of stories, and the most extraordinary longitudinal culture. And this is what they're asking. And I so want us to achieve that, this 46th Parliament. And I honestly believe everything else that's talked about around closing the gap in health outcomes for Aboriginal people, around education, around prosperity, none of those things can actually progress until we get this bit right, because it's so fundamental to that generational trauma, to that hurt, to colonisation, and to the betterment of every single Australian. This is not about dividing us. This is so about uniting us. If that is my strongest hope and dream for this Parliament, is that we could have that referendum, and that we have not only constitutional recognition, which I think we could run a referendum tomorrow and get that, but voice to Parliament as well. That's what they're asking for. It's nothing to be fearful of here. This is good.
Indeed, leap in and do it.
Yeah,
we can only hope.
Well, I think we've got to do more than hope. We've got to act.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm planning to do, and I'm getting all my team around me now, but we're pretty good in this electorate at having kitchen table conversations. We're really good at the community bringing forward their hopes and dreams and their plans to make them a reality. So I'd love to see Indi leading the nation on calling for this, really the people calling for this, so that really the politicians at the end of the day sitting in the House have no option but to yield to the will of the people.
Was that the secret of the success in the campaign leading up to the election?
Yeah.
Those conversations?
Yes. Because I think what we've found in Indi is that we're not afraid to have a conversation. We don't let fear get in the way of having a conversation with another human being, providing that we're doing it in a way that's not lobbying them or not dampening down their voice, but actually listening to each other. Again, find what you've got in common. open the crack, let the light get in. And then it's extraordinary what unites us. And once we're united, well, gosh, anything can happen. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything can happen. And we've got a lovely gift for you that Johnny went out and sourced. He's a very rural man. I'll just go off camera and get this for you. It's just over here.
Straight to the gift registry, is it, John? Hope it's a dozen eggs.
Now you're going to
pumpkin.
You can declare this, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Now we've got
look at the
oversized orange from
Griffith. Beautiful, John.
A passion fruit from.
Oh, lovely.
Arnold's. Arnold's Wodonga. That's our first sponsor. More orange.
Yep, great.
Now we've got these things too. Now Johnny calls them lemonades.
Oh, very nice.
The fruit is actually called lemonade.
Fantastic. What's it a cross between, John?
Lemon and lemonade, I guess.
Ah, yeah.
No, and he said, where's those? So there's tons of those there, and some farm fresh eggs.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, John. These are just beautiful.
Yeah. So there's your gift.
Well, and of course, I love anything orange. So that's always a winner. And there's a little bit of bite. There's a little bit of acid in a lemon, and occasionally you've got to suck on a lemon just to,
Yeah, and occasionally you've got to spit out that acid.
You do. In the nicest way you can, but sometimes you've got to get a bit of bite in there, and you need passion in your soul.
Absolutely. And passion you have tons of. Thanks so much for being with us today and taking the time.
Oh, John, it's been an absolute pleasure.
We wish you every success up there.
Thank you. And I say to everyone, please come join me.
Yeah.
Kathy ran a brilliant back of house in Canberra program. That is on again.
Yeah.
So we're taking names now. Waiting list already forming.
Yeah, you can go up and have a cup of tea, morning tea. And
oh, no, you've got to work hard, actually. No sitting around having cups of tea.
I just had a cup of tea. I didn't have to do any work.
Oh, no. Well, you can come up for 4 days and you'll be set to work as a member of the team.
Yeah,
and
great.
It's a brilliant experience. Anyone who's done it has come back, in raptures about what they've learnt and how much they've developed. So that's on again. And, of course, any opportunity that you have to interact with me in the office is I'm so welcoming of that, and I really want to hear from people.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Dr Helen Haines, 18th member for the federal seat of Indi.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.